She thought because she drove a white BMW X5 and ran the HOA for the new, quote, Sterling Estates, she owned my land. She was about to learn that in Texas, the deed is king, and my family's deed to the Riverside Ranch was written in 1940, long before her cookie-cutter mansions were even a bad idea. I spent $52,000 on concrete just to watch her life fall apart, and honestly, it was worth every single penny. It started, as these things often do, with a misunderstanding of physics and a profound lack of respect. The road leading to the back 40 of my property, a packed dirt and gravel affair my grandfather laid down with a mule and a drag, ran parallel to the new development. It was my road, on my land, plain and simple. The survey markers, half rusted but still standing proud, made that clear as a cloudless August sky. For 80 years, that road was used for one thing: moving cattle and equipment. It wasn't designed for German-engineered SUVs going 60. The first time I saw her, Cynthia Bradshaw, she was a blur of white paint and entitlement. I was on my old John Deere, moving a round bale for the winter feed, and she laid on the horn like I was blocking the entrance to the Neiman Marcus parking lot. The sound, sharp and alien out here, spooked a couple of younger heifers. I pulled over, killed the engine, and tipped my hat as she rolled down her window. The air that blasted out of her car was 10 degrees cooler than the outside and smelled of synthetic lavender. "Can you please hurry it up?" she said, her voice tight and clipped. She wasn't asking, she was commanding. Some of us have schedules. I gave her my slow, deliberate rancher's smile, the one that says I've got all the time in the world and you have none of it. "Ma'am, this here is a private ranch road. You might be lost." She scoffed, a little puff of air that ruffled her perfectly coiffed blonde hair. "I'm the president of the Sterling Estates Homeowners Association. This is the access road to the back gate. It's on the community plat." I leaned against the fender of my tractor. The metal was warm from the sun. "Well, ma'am, I've got the deed and the original county survey in a safe at my house that says this road, and the 10 feet of grass on either side of it, belongs to the Riverside Ranch. Has since my grandpappy bought it. So unless your HOA plat was signed by him, I'm afraid you've been misinformed." Her eyes narrowed. They were the color of a stormy sky just before Ailes. "We'll see about that. My lawyer will be in touch." She rolled up the window, gunned the engine, and fishtailed a little as she sped off, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled on me and my tractor like a fine layer of contempt. That was the first time, the polite warning. It was like throwing a pebble at a charging bull. My wife Sarah, a high school science teacher with more patience in her little finger than I had in my whole body, heard the story that night over dinner. She stirred her iced tea, the cubes clinking against the glass. "Wyatt, you were nice about it, right?" "As nice as I know how to be," I told her. "Tipped my hat and everything." "Okay," she said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "Just be careful. People like that, they don't fight fair. They don't understand boundaries unless they're written into a contract with a penalty clause." She was right, of course. She usually was. Out here, boundaries were marked by barbed wire and mutual respect. In her world, they were marked by lawyers and lawsuits. A storm was brewing, and I could smell the ozone in the air. A week later, I found the first sign of real trouble. I was checking the fence line along that back road, and there it was, a professionally printed sign, laminated and mounted on a metal stake. It read, "Future home of the Sterling Estates Equestrian Trail and Community Access Point. Private HOA amenity." They hadn't just used my road, they were advertising it. They were selling my land as part of their package. The anger that went through me was cold and sharp. This wasn't a mistake anymore. This was theft, plain and simple, just dressed up in corporate jargon. I pulled the sign out of the ground, the stake making a satisfying sucking sound as it came free. I tossed it in the bed of my truck and drove straight to the main gate of Sterling Estates. The gate was one of those wrought iron monstrosities, designed to look old but fooling no one. A small guardhouse sat next to it. I didn't bother with the call box. I just parked, got out, and walked up to the little window. The guard looked up from his paperback. "I need to speak with a Cynthia Bradshaw," I said, keeping my voice level. "Is she expecting you?" "She will be." I held up the sign. "This was on my property. I want to return it to her, along with a message." He made the call. A few minutes later, the white BMW X5 pulled up. She got out, dressed in tennis whites that had never seen a court, and slammed the door. "What is the meaning of this? You can't just show up here." "And you can't put your signs on my land," I countered, holding it out for her. "This road is not, nor will it ever be, an equestrian trail or a community access point. This is the last time I'm going to say it politely. Stay off my property." She snatched the sign from my hand. "You are obstructing access to a documented easement. I've seen the developer's maps. You're just a bitter old man who can't stand to see progress. Now get off our property before I have you arrested for trespassing." I just laughed, a low, humorless sound. "Ma'am, your property ends at that fence line over there. This driveway, this guard shack, it's all part of the development. But the road you're using to get to your supposed back gate, that's mine. You have my number. Next time you or anyone from your little club sets foot on it, the sheriff will be the one I call." I turned and walked back to my truck, the weight of her glare feeling like a physical thing on my back. The war had begun. I just didn't know how dirty she was willing to fight. The next escalation came 2 weeks later. I was moving a small herd of my best Angus heifers, including my prize girl Daisy, who was heavy with calf, from the west pasture to the east. It's a slow process. You can't rush a pregnant cow. We were using the back road, as we had for generations. It was the safest way, keeping them off the main highway. I had my son, young Ben, helping me. We were on foot, gently guiding them along. That's when I heard it. The high-pitched whine of a high-performance engine coming up fast. It was the white BMW. Instead of slowing down, she sped up, laying on that god-awful European horn. The sound ripped through the quiet afternoon. The cattle, already on edge, panicked. It was a stampede. They scattered, eyes wide with terror, crashing through the weak section of fence into the dense woods. "Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash!" Cynthia Bradshaw screamed this as her BMW barreled past, missing one of my heifers by inches. She didn't even slow down. My blood ran ice cold. I sprinted toward the chaos, yelling for Ben to stay put. Heifers were running blind. One of them could break a leg, a career-ending injury for a show animal. Then I saw Daisy. She'd gone down. She was trying to get up, her back legs scrambling for purchase, but she couldn't. Her belly was heavy, and the fall had been hard. A low moan of pain came from her, a sound that tore right through me. I got to her side, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran my hands over her legs, her hips. Nothing seemed broken, thank God, but she was in distress. Her breathing was ragged. I looked up and saw the BMW disappearing in a cloud of dust. The rage I felt was pure, white-hot, and clarifying. This was no longer about a road. This was about my animals, my livelihood, my family's legacy. She had crossed a line etched in the very soul of this land. We spent the next 2 hours rounding up the scattered herd. The vet came out, a good man named Doc Evans. He looked Daisy over. "She's bruised up, Wyatt," he said, his face grim. "The stress of this, it could push her into early labor. We need to watch her very, very closely. A premature calf, especially from a prize bull, the odds aren't good." That night, after getting Daisy settled in the maternity pen under barn lights, I went to the workshop. I found the heaviest duty chain I owned and a big, ugly padlock the size of my fist. I drove the truck down to the entrance of the back road, right where it met the asphalt of the county lane. I looped the chain around 2 thick, old fence posts my grandfather had set in concrete 50 years ago and snapped the lock shut. Then I hammered in a new sign, one I'd painted myself in stark, angry letters. "Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This means you, Cynthia." Sarah came out and stood beside me, her arms crossed against the evening chill. She looked at the chain, then at my face. "This is it, isn't it? The point of no return." "She hurt Daisy," I said, my voice rough. "She put my son in danger. There are no more warnings, no more polite conversations. From now on, we speak the only language she seems to understand. Absolute barriers." I looked at the locked gate, a simple, solid declaration of ownership. It felt good. It felt final. I was so naive. I thought a lock and chain would be enough. I had yet to learn the depths of her entitled desperation. The lock lasted less than 48 hours. I found it Friday morning, lying in the dirt, a single, neat cut through the hardened steel shackle. Bolt cutters. Big ones. The chain was tossed aside in the weeds. Tire tracks, the distinctive tread of her expensive run-flat tires, were pressed into the gravel, heading deep into my property. She hadn't just trespassed. She had committed felony destruction of property. I stood there, the violated lock in my hand, and felt a calm settle over me. It was the kind of calm that comes when all ambiguity is gone. The gloves were off. I called the sheriff's department. Deputy Miller, a young man I'd known since he was in diapers, came out. I showed him the cut lock. I showed him the tire tracks. I showed him my sign. "I know who did it, Mark," I said. "Cynthia Bradshaw, the head of that new HOA. Miller sighed, pushing his hat back on his head. "Wyatt, I believe you. But you didn't see her do it, did you? The tracks match her car. She's the only one who's been causing trouble." "I can go have a talk with her," he said. "But without a witness or a camera, probable cause is a tough hill to climb for a misdemeanor mischief charge. She'll just deny it." That's when I knew I had to start building a different kind of case. That afternoon, I went to town and bought 3 trail cameras, the kind hunters use. They were motion activated and had night vision. I mounted them discreetly in the trees overlooking the entrance to the road. One aimed at the gate, one down the road, and one with a wider angle. I replaced the chain with an even thicker one and a lock that was advertised as bolt cutter proof. It was a lie, of course. Nothing is proof against a determined thief. But it was a start. The very next day, a Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification from the camera app. I opened it and watched the live feed. There she was. The white BMW pulled up to the gate. Cynthia got out, dressed in a sharp business suit, followed by a couple in their mid-40s who looked wide-eyed and wealthy. She was giving them a tour. "And this," I heard her say, her voice tinny through the phone speaker, "is the exclusive residence trail. It leads to a lovely creek and is perfect for morning jogs or horseback riding. Direct, private access. It's one of our most coveted amenities. She pointed at my lock. The rancher next door is a bit territorial. We're working through the legalities of the formal easement, but our lawyers assure us it's just a matter of time. Then she produced a key. A key. She had a copy of the key to my bolt cutter-proof lock. I felt my stomach clench. How? Did she pick it? Have it duplicated? It didn't matter. The audacity was breathtaking. She unlocked my gate, my brand new lock, and swung it open, welcoming the prospective buyers onto my land as if she were a queen granting an audience. I saved the video. High definition. Time-stamped. Clear as day. I now had her dead to rights on trespassing. I called Deputy Miller again. I emailed him the video file. An hour later, he was at her door. I watched from my porch with a pair of binoculars as he spoke to her on her pristine marble doorstep. I saw her gesticulating, her face a mask of outrage. I saw Miller, professional and calm, just shaking his head. He handed her a citation. It wasn't an arrest, but it was a start. It was a piece of paper that said she was wrong and I was right. I thought, foolishly, that a citation for criminal trespass would be the end of it. It was the beginning of the real war. 2 days later, a man in a county truck pulled up to my house. He had a clipboard and a grim expression. He was from the Environmental Protection Agency. "Mr. McCoy?" he asked, not offering a hand. "We've received an anonymous complaint about illegal dumping and potential water contamination on your property, specifically concerning chemical runoff from your cattle operations into Willow Creek." Willow Creek. The same creek she was promising her buyers access to. I almost laughed. My operation was as clean as they came. We'd won awards for sustainable ranching. "A complaint?" I asked. "From who?" "It was anonymous, sir," he said, stonewalling. "I'll need to take a look around. Take some water and soil samples." "Be my guest," I said, sweeping my arm toward my land. "Take all the samples you want. You'll find more contaminants in a bottle of Evian." He spent 4 hours on my property. He walked the creek bed. He took samples from the watering troughs. He inspected my fuel tanks and my manure compost pile. He was thorough, I'll give him that. But he was on a fool's errand. When he left, he looked less grim and more annoyed. "Everything appears to be in order, Mr. McCoy. The samples will go to the lab, but I don't expect we'll find anything. Sorry to have wasted your time." "You didn't waste my time," I told him. "The person who made the false report did." I knew who it was. It had Cynthia Bradshaw's fingerprints all over it. A petty, vindictive act designed to harass me, to tie me up in bureaucratic red tape. A week after the EPA cleared me, a truck from the county health department showed up. Another anonymous tip. This one was about diseased livestock, claiming my Angus herd was a public health risk. Dr. Evans, my vet, had to come out and show them my herd's pristine health records and vaccination logs. Another day wasted. Another baseless accusation. Then came the lawsuit. A process server, a kid who looked barely out of high school, found me mending a fence. He handed me a thick envelope with a nervous air, as if he expected me to shoot him. Inside was a summons. Cynthia Bradshaw and the Sterling Estates HOA were suing me. They were seeking a court order to declare my back road a public easement and demanding I remove any and all obstructions. They were also suing me for damages, claiming my illegal blockade was interfering with their ability to sell properties. I read the document standing right there in the field, the sun beating down on my neck. The legal jargon was dense, but the core of it was a lie. They claimed a prescriptive easement, arguing that the road had been used by the public for years, a claim so absurd it was laughable. Before the development went in, the only person who ever used that road was me, my father before me, and his father before him. That night, Sarah read through the lawsuit, her brow furrowed. She was the calm one, the logical one, but I could see the anger simmering in her eyes. This is insane, Wyatt. They're just making it all up. That's how people like her operate, I said. They throw enough mud, hoping some of it sticks. They try to bury you in legal fees until you give up. I tapped the thick sheaf of papers. But she's made a mistake. She's put her lies down on paper, in a court of law, and now I'm going to prove it. The next morning, I was at the county clerk's office when they opened. I spent the entire day in the dusty, quiet archives, pulling old survey maps and property records. I went back decade by decade. I found the original 1940 deed, the paper brittle and yellowed, my grandfather's signature strong and clear. I found the original survey map, drawn by hand, showing the exact boundaries of the Riverside Ranch. There was no easement. There had never been an easement. But I didn't stop there. I started looking at the records for the Sterling Estates development. I pulled the plat maps they had filed with the county. And that's when I found the first crack in her story. The official plat, the one approved by the County Planning Commission, clearly showed the development's property line ending a full 20 feet from my road. My road wasn't on their plat at all. It was shown as what it was, adjacent private property, belonging to the McCoy parcel. The map she was showing her buyers, the one that claimed my road was a community amenity, was a fabrication. It was a sales tool, not a legal document. It was fraud. My heart started beating a little faster. This was bigger than just trespassing. She wasn't just lying to me. She was lying to the people buying her multi-million-dollar homes. She was selling them a bill of goods based on property she had no right to. That's when Eddie the mailman became my unwitting secret agent. Eddie had been delivering mail in this part of the county for 30 years. He knew everyone and everything. I saw him on his route a few days later and flagged him down for a chat. "Eddie, you delivered to that new Sterling Estates, right?" I asked, leaning on his truck door. He sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yep, a lot of glossy catalogs and legal notices. That Bradshaw woman, the one in charge, she gets more certified letters than a tax cheat in April." That piqued my interest. Certified letters? Eddie lowered his voice. "From banks, Wyatt. Lots of them. And from a law firm in Dallas. Looks like a divorce attorney. The word is, her ex-husband took her to the cleaners. She's in this development up to her eyeballs. Apparently, she's got to sell all those lots by the end of the year, or the bank takes everything." The pieces clicked into place. Desperation. She was financially ruined, and this development was her only way out. She couldn't afford to have an amenity like the ranch access disappear. Her entire sales pitch depended on it. Eddie leaned a little closer. "That ain't all. I delivered a sales packet to one of the new owners the other day. Glanced at it. She's promising them access, Wyatt, in writing. She's selling your road as a deeded amenity." That's when I knew I had her. It wasn't just a lie on a sales map anymore. It was contractual fraud. She was putting her criminal enterprise in writing and selling it for millions. With the EPA and Health Department inspections coming up clean, and the discovery of her blatant fraud, I knew I had to move beyond defense. It was time to go on the offense. It was time to build the wall. A lawsuit would take years and bleed me dry. A citation was a slap on the wrist. She needed to learn a lesson that was physical, permanent, and utterly uncompromising. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor who thinks your property line is just a friendly suggestion, you know the frustration. When I realized she was committing felony fraud using my family's land, I decided I wasn't just going to win. I was going to build a monument to her defeat. If you appreciate a good plan coming together, do me a favor and hit that like button. And subscribe, because the story of how this concrete masterpiece came to be is just getting started. Let me know in the comments if you think a wall is the best way to deal with a neighbor from hell. I called a guy I knew named Big Mike. He ran a construction company that specialized in agricultural and industrial jobs. He was a man of few words, most of them gruff, who viewed the world through a simple lens. Things were either built right or they were built wrong. He hated HOAs and people who drove BMWs with a passion that burned with the heat of 1,000 suns. He was perfect. He came out to the ranch, his dusty Ford F350 rumbling down my driveway. I walked him out to the back road. I showed him the cut lock, the tire tracks, and the fraudulent HOA sign I'd kept as a souvenir. She's selling this road as part of her development, I explained. I need to block it off. Not with a chain, not with a gate she can cut. I need something permanent. Big Mike spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. He kicked at the ground with his steel-toed boot. You want a fence? No, I said. I want a wall. He looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his weathered face. A wall. I like it. What are we talking? Cinder block? I was thinking bigger. Poured concrete. Steel rebar reinforcement. I want it 12 feet high, and I want it to run the entire width of the access point, from that old oak tree to the fence post on the other side. About 60 feet across. Big Mike whistled, low and long. Son, that ain't a wall. That's a fortress. That's a keep the zombies out type of wall. It's going to be expensive. I've got a cattle fund set aside for emergencies, I told him. And this has become an emergency. I've got $52,000 in cash. Can you do it for that? He did some quick math on a notepad he pulled from his shirt pocket. Yeah, I can do it for that. We'll have to pull an agricultural permit, but that's easy. We'll file it as an agricultural security barrier. It's for protecting livestock from road traffic and trespassers. Totally legal. The county can't say boo about it, and she sure as hell can't. He looked at the entrance, then back at me, his eyes gleaming. Even a tank ain't getting through this. The final piece of the plan was timing. I checked the Sterling Estates community website. They had a big Fall Showcase of Homes event planned in 2 weeks. It was an open house for the entire development, targeting wealthy buyers from the city. They'd be funneling prospective clients in all weekend. Cynthia would be there, in her element, spinning her web of lies. That's when we would build it. The week leading up to the construction was a flurry of activity. Big Mike's crew came out and did the survey work and set the forms. From the road, it just looked like a bit of routine fence maintenance. Cynthia drove past a couple of times, slowing down to glare, but she didn't seem to grasp the scale of what was about to happen. Her lawsuit had given her a sense of legal superiority. She thought the courts would give her my land, so she didn't pay enough attention to the dirt work being done on it. I, meanwhile, was preparing for the other side of the battle. I had my lawyer draft cease and desist letters. I made 100 copies of my deed, the original survey map, and the official approved county plat for Sterling Estates that showed my road was not part of their property. I also printed out still frames from the trail cam video of Cynthia trespassing with her clients. I put each set of documents into a neat folder. I was preparing for a public unveiling. The Friday of her big open house weekend dawned crisp and clear. At 5 a.m., long before the sun came up, the first concrete truck rumbled down the county road. It was followed by another and another. A convoy of heavy machinery, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom, all converging on the entrance to my back road. Big Mike was there, orchestrating the whole thing like a battlefield general. By noon, the foundation was poured, a massive trench filled with concrete and a cage of thick steel rebar. By late afternoon, the vertical forms were in place, and the pumper truck was filling them with thousands of pounds of wet concrete. The noise was immense, a constant roar of engines and machinery that echoed across the valley. I imagined Cynthia, over in her pristine development, hearing the sound and wondering what it was. Her first appearance was around 3 p.m. The white BMW came screeching to a halt on the asphalt. She got out, her face pale with shock and fury. The wall was already 8 feet high, a monolithic slab of wet gray concrete. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" she shrieked at Big Mike, who was calmly directing the concrete pump. Big Mike turned, pulled a rag from his back pocket, and slowly wiped his hands. "Ma'am, we're building a wall." "You can't do this. This is community property. I have a lawsuit pending. You have to stop this immediately." I chose that moment to walk over from where I'd been watching. "Actually, he can," I said, my voice calm. "This is private property, as the county records clearly show. And we have a permit for an agricultural security barrier. Everything's legal and above board." I handed her a copy of the permit. She glanced at it, her hands trembling with rage. "This is illegal. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the police. I'll have you all arrested." She pulled out her phone and started stabbing at the screen, screaming into it about rogue construction and illegal blockades. Deputy Miller arrived 20 minutes later. Cynthia ran up to his car as soon as he got out. "Arrest them! Arrest all of them! They're building this monstrosity on HOA property." Miller walked over, looked at the wall, looked at the construction crew, and then looked at me. I handed him a copy of the permit and a copy of my deed. He read them both carefully. He walked back over to Cynthia. "Ma'am," he said, his voice tired, "Mr. McCoy is building on his own land. He has a valid permit from the county. There's nothing I can do. This is a civil matter." "A civil matter? He is ruining my open house. He is blocking access." "He's blocking access to his own property," Miller corrected her gently, "which he is legally entitled to do. I suggest you take this up with your lawyer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual crimes to attend to." He got back in his car and drove away. Cynthia stood there, sputtering, as the last of the concrete was poured. She screamed until she was purple. She threatened. She cursed, but the wall just got taller. By Friday evening, it stood there, a 12-foot high, 60-foot wide, 2-foot thick monument to her hubris. It was still soft, encased in its wooden forms, but it was undeniably there, a solid, immovable fact. The crew left for the weekend to let the concrete cure. Before they left, they installed the final piece of the puzzle, a massive 12-foot-high gate made of reinforced steel, set on posts sunk 10 feet into the ground in their own concrete footings. It was a gate designed for a prison, not a ranch. Big Mike handed me the only 2 keys. "She ain't cutting through that with bolt cutters," he said with a grin. "She'd need a plasma torch and a week." Saturday was the main day of her open house. I sat on my porch with a cold beer and watched the parade of luxury cars turn into Sterling Estates. I could see the confusion on their faces as they passed the massive, raw concrete structure at the turnoff. I saw Cynthia trying to play hostess, her smile stretched thin and brittle, trying to direct people away from the unfortunate construction dispute with the unreasonable neighbor. The pressure must have been building in her all day. The questions from potential buyers, the whispers, the sheer, ugly, undeniable presence of my wall, ruining her carefully curated illusion of pastoral exclusivity. The breaking point came just after sunset. I was in the barn checking on Daisy, who was thankfully doing much better. I heard the roar of an engine, much too loud, much too close. It was a sound of pure, unrestrained fury. I ran out just in time to see the white BMW X5 hurtling down the county road. It didn't slow down. It didn't swerve. It aimed directly for the new steel gate. Cynthia Bradshaw, in a fit of insane rage, was trying to ram her way through. The impact was catastrophic. There was a sound like a bomb going off, a deafening shriek of tortured metal. The BMW, a $50,000 piece of German engineering, crumpled like a tin can. The entire front end of the vehicle disintegrated. The hood buckled, the engine was driven back into the firewall, and both front wheels were splayed out at grotesque angles. Steam and smoke poured from the wreckage. The gate, however, barely moved. It shuddered, the steel groaning in protest, and one of the hinges bent slightly. A few scratches marred the black paint, but it held. It held firm against the assault of a 2-ton SUV traveling at over 60 miles per hour. Big Mike had built it right. I sprinted toward the wreck, my first thought being to check if she was alive. The airbag had deployed, a ghostly white mushroom filling the driver's side. I saw her slumped against it, dazed. A trickle of blood ran from her forehead. I pulled out my phone and called 911. "There's been a crash on County Road 212, I said, my voice steady. "A woman has driven her car into a steel gate. Yes, she's conscious. You'd better send an ambulance and the sheriff." As the sirens wailed in the distance, I stood there looking at the scene. The destroyed luxury car. The immovable gate. The woman who had, in one final, desperate act of entitlement, destroyed her own vehicle trying to breach a barrier on land that was never hers. The trail cameras I had left in place had captured the entire thing in glorious, high-definition color. It was the nail in her coffin, and she had hammered it in herself. The physical barrier was sealed. The next battle would be fought in public, and I had all the ammunition I would ever need. The aftermath of the crash was pure chaos. The ambulance took a shaken but not seriously injured Cynthia to the hospital for observation. Deputy Miller, now Sheriff Miller after the last election, showed up and looked at the scene with a weary resignation. He'd been dealing with this feud for months. "Wyatt," he said, shaking his head as he looked at the mangled BMW, "what in the hell was she thinking?" "She wasn't," I replied. "She was just feeling. And she feels entitled to my land." I showed him the footage from the trail cam on my phone. The video was damning. It showed her lining up the shot, taking a deep breath, and flooring it. There was no ambiguity. It was a deliberate act. "Well," Miller sighed, "on top of everything else, that's felony destruction of property. Her own, ironically, and reckless endangerment. We'll be taking her statement at the hospital. I have a feeling she's going to need a much better lawyer." With Cynthia temporarily out of commission and her vehicle reduced to scrap metal, a strange quiet settled over the ranch. But I knew it was just the eye of the storm. She had staked her entire financial future on selling those houses with the promise of access to my land. The wall wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a mortal threat to her scam. Her lawsuit was still active, and the buyers in Sterling Estates were surely getting restless. It was time to end it. Not in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. The perfect opportunity presented itself a week later. The county was holding a town hall meeting to discuss zoning changes for future developments. It was a hot-button issue, and the local news station was going to be there. More importantly, I knew the residents of Sterling Estates would be there, anxious to protect their property values. And Cynthia Bradshaw, out of the hospital with a few bruises and a mountain of debt, would be there to rally them. It was the perfect stage. I spent the day before the meeting with Sarah, assembling my packets of evidence. The copies of the deed, the surveys, the fraudulent sales plat, the photos of the cut lock, the stills from the trespassing videos, and the spectacular finale of the BMW crash. We made 50 packets. Sarah looked at the stack of folders on our kitchen table. "You're planning something," she said. It wasn't a question. A slow smile spread across her face. Good. Her support was the bedrock I'd built all of this on. The town hall was packed. The air was thick with the scent of cheap coffee and civic anxiety. I saw the residents of Sterling Estates huddled together in one section, a sea of pastel polo shirts and concerned expressions. Cynthia was in the center of them, holding court. She looked haggard, the stress showing around her eyes, but she had plastered on a smile of confident outrage. She was playing the victim, the beleaguered community leader fighting the backwards, aggressive rancher. I waited. I let the county commissioners drone on about easements and setbacks. I let other residents have their say. I watched Cynthia, waiting for her to take the podium. When her turn came, she strode to the microphone with practiced confidence. "My name is Cynthia Bradshaw, and I am the president of the Sterling Estates HOA," she began, her voice ringing with false sincerity. "I am here tonight to talk about community safety and neighborly conduct. For months, my community, a community of families who have invested millions into this county, has been terrorized by a landowner who refuses to acknowledge a historical easement. He has blockaded our access, endangered our children, and created an eyesore with a hideous, illegal concrete wall." Murmurs of agreement rippled through her supporters. She was good. I had to give her that. "He has ignored legal proceedings and taken the law into his own hands," she continued, her voice rising with emotion. "We are simply asking the county to enforce the law and restore the access that we were promised when we bought our homes. The access that is clearly documented in our community plans." That was my cue. I stood up. "Ma'am, could you show us that documentation?" I asked, my voice carrying across the silent room. All eyes turned to me. Cynthia froze, her face tightening. "I don't have it with me," she stammered. "That's a shame," I said, walking toward the front of the room, carrying my box of folders. "Because I do." I approached the podium as the county commissioner, a man I knew from the Cattlemen's Association, nodded for me to speak. "My name is Wyatt McCoy. My family has owned the Riverside Ranch since 1940. The land Miss Bradshaw is referring to is my land, and she knows it." I turned to face the Sterling Estates residents. "Miss Bradshaw has been telling you a story, a very compelling story, but it's a fantasy. A fantasy she needed you to believe so you would buy her houses." I started handing out the folders. I gave one to the commissioners, one to the reporter from the local news, and then I walked over and began distributing them to the homeowners. In that folder, you will find a copy of my deed. You'll find the official county survey from 1940. And most importantly, you will find the official, final plat map for Sterling Estates that was filed with this county. I pointed to the large screen where they were projecting the meeting agenda. "Commissioner, could you please project page 3 of that plat map?" He did. The map filled the screen. I walked up and pointed. As you can see, right here, the property line of Sterling Estates ends right there. The road, the creek, the land she has been selling you as a private community amenity is and always has been the private property of the Riverside Ranch. A wave of rustling paper and hushed, angry whispers swept through the room as the homeowners looked at the evidence in their hands. They were seeing, for the first time, the legal document that contradicted the glossy sales map they'd been shown. "For months, I have tried to handle this privately," I continued, my voice hard and clear. "Instead, I was met with trespassing, destruction of my property, and a campaign of harassment involving false reports to the EPA and the Health Department. Miss Bradshaw even filed a frivolous lawsuit, which her own evidence, this plat map, proves is baseless." I then turned my attention directly to Cynthia, who looked like she had seen a ghost. "But it's worse than that, isn't it, Cynthia? You didn't just lie. You committed fraud. You put this amenity into your sales contracts, didn't you? You sold access you didn't own. You took people's money based on a criminal deception." One of the homeowners, a man in a golf shirt who had been looking at his folder with a growing sense of horror, stood up. "Is this true? Is our contract void?" Before I could answer, the doors at the back of the hall opened. Sheriff Miller walked in, followed by 2 of his deputies. They walked slowly, deliberately, down the center aisle. They weren't there for the zoning meeting. They stopped right in front of the podium. Cynthia stared at them, her mouth opening and closing silently. "Cynthia Bradshaw," Sheriff Miller said, his voice calm but firm, leaving no room for argument. "You're under arrest for multiple counts of felony fraud, uttering a forged instrument, and criminal mischief." The handcuffs clicked. The sound was deafening in the stunned silence of the room. The cameras flashed, the local news crew capturing every moment of her humiliation. Her face, a mask of disbelief and fury, was illuminated in the stark, repeated bursts of light. And I just stood there, leaning against the podium, watching her empire of lies crumble into dust. The deputies led her away, her screeching protests about her lawyer echoing in the hall. I turned back to the shocked homeowners. "As for your contracts," I said, "I'm a rancher, not a lawyer. But if I were you, I'd be talking to the district attorney's office about joining the fraud case against her, and I'd be getting my deposits back." The meeting devolved into chaos after that, but my part was done. I had laid the truth out for everyone to see. I had used her own greed and desperation as the bait in a trap she had walked into willingly. The wall had been the weapon, but the truth had been the killing blow. The fallout was swift and total. The news story ran on the 10 o'clock broadcast, complete with footage of her arrest and an interview with me, where I calmly held up my grandfather's deed. The Sterling Estates development imploded. With the fraud exposed, buyers pulled out of their contracts en masse. The banks that had been sending her certified letters foreclosed. The entire project went bankrupt. Cynthia Bradshaw, already drowning in divorce debt, lost everything. She pleaded guilty to the fraud charges to avoid a longer sentence and ended up serving 18 months in a state facility. The last I heard, she was working as a telemarketer somewhere up north. The white BMW was sold for scrap. The half-finished mansions of Sterling Estates sat empty for over a year before another, more honest developer bought the land from the bank for pennies on the dollar. They renamed it Willow Creek Meadows. Their first official act was to post a large, prominent sign at their entrance. "We respect our neighbors. No access to Riverside Ranch." Life on the ranch went back to the way it was. The seasons turned. Calves were born. Hay was baled. The back road was quiet again, used only by my tractor and my cattle. Every now and then, I drive down there and look at the wall. It stands there still, a 12-foot high, 60-foot wide slab of Texas justice. It cost me $52,000, the price of 3 prize bulls. But the peace and quiet it bought? That was priceless. It's a permanent reminder that in this part of the world, you can't build a future on lies, especially when you try to build it on someone else's land. They say good fences make good neighbors, but sometimes you need a 12-foot concrete wall to make a felon. It's a hard lesson, but some people can only learn things the hard way. Staring at that wall, with nothing but the sound of the wind in the grass and the lowing of my cattle, I feel a deep sense of satisfaction. Justice isn't always found in a courtroom. Sometimes it's mixed with water, sand, and stone, and poured into a form you built yourself. If you enjoyed this pro-revenge and believe that a person's land is their kingdom, hit that like and subscribe button. I've got more stories from a lifetime of ranching and dealing with folks who think the rules don't apply to them. Share this with anyone you know who's ever had to fight for their property line. And let me know in the comments, what's the craziest thing a neighbor has ever tried to pull on you?